the grand sum of where I am right now is where I should be and I'm supposed to be. There's some things that I think I would do differently, but I think it's part of the story of who I am at this point.
This is a journey.
Let me take you on a journey.
There will still be
The journey. The journey.
new sheriff in town, and his name is
The journey.
Journey.
This thing is bigger than Nino Brown. This is
The journey. The journey.
What is it that moved you?
The journey. The journey. The journey. The journey.
Welcome back to another episode of The Journey. I'm your host, Larry Robinson, and today we have a Memphis icon that I believe many of you will already know, affectionately known as Bobby, and I'm going to leave it at that for right now. First, we're going to talk about our quote. Our quote comes from another Bobby, Bob Marley, and it goes a little something like this. You never know how strong you are until being strong is your only choice. What does that mean? Let me give you a little story real quick. As a parent, as a father, I never realized the level of strength it would take. And I never knew what strength I had until I got to this point. So once again, just be strong, stick and stay and keep your focus because you're real strong. You just don't know it yet. Now, let's talk about this brother, Robert White. Robert White, affectionately known as Bobby, born and bred in South Memphis. I put an F on that South, too. South Memphis. Graduate of Central High School. He's a Morehouse man. As I said, Morehouse man. He's a son. He's a brother. He's a father, husband, and an amazing business executive. And probably one of the more sharpest brothers I've met while being in Memphis, Tennessee. So listen, without further ado, we have Brother Bobby White.
Thank you, sir.
How
Good
are
to
you,
be
sir?
here. All is well, man. Good to be here with you, sir.
I'm honored to have you here,
Oh,
man.
man,
Honored
please.
to
I'm
have
happy
you
to be
here.
in your presence.
Yeah. So tell me, let's go back to South Memphis. Young Bobby White, you got a crib, you in the crib. Who's in the house with you?
It's me, my sister, who's 3 years older, my dad, Robert White, Senior, and my mother, Gaynell White, both educators, right?
Okay.
So for me, growing up was always the fact my dad, my mom I went to the school where my mom was the teacher.
Oh,
so
wow.
I was held to a high standard. It's one of those things where you can't get in too much trouble. But then my dad was the principal. He was known for, at the time, Dr. Harrington being going back many years for most of his career, Dr. Harrington was the principal. The superintendent of schools.
Right.
So my dad was a tough cookie, right?
Okay.
And so they said he could get it quiet at a sock hop. So if he could do that at school, you imagine the straight line that you walk at the house.
Absolutely.
But a great man, loved him to death, still the baddest cat I've ever known. So I appreciate that privilege of being raised in a house like that.
Okay. Outside of the family, outside of the household, who had the biggest influence on young Bobby?
You know, honestly, it is difficult to say. I would probably say that there was a community. I mean, it is, I think that's one of the things that I feel some kind of way about in terms of how I was raised versus how others were raised. My parents were the type of parents that let you know, listen, if he gets out of line, you can get him, So we had people at the church, people in the neighborhood. There was this respect that we had for our neighbors, our community members, the ways in which we serve. I was telling someone this story the other day. The first time I figured out that you can work and actually get paid for work, it was the most revolutionary thing I've ever seen in my whole life. God.
The fact that you can get paid
You
for
get
working.
paid for working hard? Keep in mind, a pat on the back, or quite frankly, the great job, because, you're raking leaves for Miss So-and-so, you're taking plates over to Sister Kendall's house.
Right.
You're doing all these things for free, my friend.
Okay.
So working. So I would just say, I can't necessarily pin it down to somebody. The people in the house are my biggest influence, but there was just a community of love and support around us where from Dora McDavid to Francis Flagg to so many of my mom and dad's friends, Peggy Herring, and there was just so many people around us who were huge influences.
Gotcha. What decision did you make as a young person that ended up having lifelong impact even though you may not have known it at the time?
I think probably for me, lifelong impact. These are great questions. I think probably for me, as a younger person, I would probably say in college, I was drawn to all my years growing up. I was like, hey, I'm looking forward to being a doctor. I want to be a doctor. What I found out in college was that, and this is one of the things why career exploration is an important thing to me. What I found is that whole thing to want to be a doctor was more about helping people than it was about a love for medicine or science.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So I changed my mind, but I didn't change my major. So
Okay.
I probably would say that changing my mind in terms of the direction that my future would take me, and this is college, this wasn't very, very young, but I was, still 18, 19. By the time I'm in my sophomore year, I was making great grades, but seeing that there was a difference between me and these other guys who love those histology labs and oh man, they were loving organic chemistry. Shout out to the late Dr. Morris Waugh. But I think that changing my mind about the direction of my future, and then those Thursday Morehouse chapel services and hearing those great leaders come before us, and my life just kind of took a pathway different than what I had intended.
Wow. How different are you from the person you dreamed you'd be?
I probably am. I've always seen this thing for myself. I'm from that whole place where I'm from that place and that school of thought where I'm doing what I should be doing in terms of serving others. And that is such a ethos. This is such a part of who I am.
But now you as a young person, you wanted to be a doctor.
As a young person, I wanted to be a doctor. But where I am in terms of helping people, right? I would say that there's still that connect where what I envision as a doctor or being in that space and kind of where I am in terms of any role I've ever held back of house, the helping people part. I mean, to this day, there are people who have no idea what I do for a living. They just know they can call me, right?
Right.
They just understand that, I've been blessed. It was Dorsey Hobson, former superintendent, that reminded me that, now Bobby White has been, it was one of those reminders, man, I guess I have been doing something since like the mid-90s.
Right.
Helping to get Hereford Jr. elected and working for a member of Congress. But I would just say this, that being in the space of serving others, that's where I always wanted to be and where I wanted to see myself years ago. And I'm just interestingly in that space a little differently than how I thought about it, but yet there.
When's the last butt whooping?
Butt whooping?
That you remember.
19 years old.
Really?
It wasn't a butt whooping.
What?
It was a smack.
What happened?
It was one of those moments where, it's like Pops reminded me, boy, I come home from college and, I forgot where I was. I'm out hanging out. You're supposed to be home at a certain time in Memphis. You be out all night in Atlanta.
Right.
But Pops said, hem me up real quick. It just reminded me, but you know what? It's like one of those things where Dad was always, and it's not a constant thing or whatever. It's just one of those reminders. You ever been jacked up real quick?
Oh, yeah.
But the whole thing of it is that, man, somebody said this to me and I understand it. They said that a 2-parent household for a little black boy is cheat code.
It is.
And it's just this idea of, you see that with your own.
Yeah.
Just in terms of, it's a wonderful, with your kids, you and your wonderful wife, it's a cheat code. And so that balance between the love and compassion of my mom and the toughness and yet the tenderness of my dad, has balanced me off and made me kind of who I am.
Every brother I know has a crazy moment when I ask this question. What was that moment that you realized that you were black? Hold on. Listen, we're going to come right back on the journey where brother Bobby White is going to share with us when he realized he was a black man. Stay right there. We're coming back. This is The Journey on the Kazukian Network.
The Boys of Color Conference is here again.
The Gentlemen's League and The Journey are hosting the Boys of Color Conference right here in Memphis, Tennessee at Agri Center International.
Parents, send your young men in grades 3 through 12 on Saturday, March 29th for a day of learning, inspiration, and mentoring From coding to boxing to cooking, there's something for everyone.
Empower your son to dream bigger, achieve greater, and break barriers. Watch him take the first step toward a brighter future.
Register at thegensleague.org.
Boys of Color Conference, March 29th at Agri Center International. Welcome back to The Journey. I'm your host, Larry Robinson, and today we have Brother Bobby White, Memphis icon, sitting in the studio with us today. So listen, we know we asked him a very important question before we left. Hold off on that. I got to ask you.
Sure.
What's your superpower, Bobby? What's that thing that you do better than anybody else that you know?
I think that probably, and it's something that, you have to recognize it and recognize that it is a superpower.
Mm-hmm.
I think my emotional intelligence is like, all those things that I do, emotional intelligence, that idea of feeling people in the room who's not comfortable, is one of those things that has gotten me through just in terms of how I relate to people. I think I found this to be the case, even with people I work for on the political side of things.
Right.
Ooh, you have people who would be hot or upset with that person, but I found that I would still be in good graces, right? Because I think it was one of those things where there's this idea where I'm my own person and people see the separation and kind of know that it's coming from a good place, right? And my ability to be able to pick up on people, and not in any bad way or used for nefarious purposes. It's just this idea that understanding people think differently, feel differently, being able to pick up on that and address people's needs. I think that's kind of one of my superpowers.
Fantastic. Who are you? Say met a person for the first time and they said, man, who are you? What would be your response?
I would say that I consider myself to be a servant. It's kind of one of those things that I go back to my days of Sunday school. He that is greatest among you will be your servant, right?
Okay.
I've always viewed, I've never thought I'm doing much of anything other than what I should do. I mentioned that earlier. It kind of goes back to my father and his ethos. It's this idea that, I see brothers out here who have defied the odds that mother and father didn't have but a 9th grade education, didn't graduate high school, and they have gone on to not just do that, but be loving and amazing fathers and husbands and graduate from college, doctorates, and all these wonderful things they've accomplished.
Right.
Those guys are to be celebrated.
Right.
And I think that we don't do enough many times to celebrate those pathways and those individuals who've overcome so much. Right. Me, on the other hand, man, my dad and mom had their master's degrees in the early 70s before I was born.
Oh, wow.
So, these cats, so I'm in a household where dad is around. We don't have any family issues and stuff. He and mom, before he passed 18 years ago, they had been married 39 years.
Right.
It's me and my sisters, no other, I say that not to.
Do you suffer any survivor's remorse or anything like that? Like, what, God, why me?
No. I think what it puts me in the mindset of is that, first of all, I empathize with what people go through and deal with and recognize that everybody didn't have what I had, right?
Right.
But it puts me also in this mindset where, man, stuff that I'm doing that sometimes I have to take a look, and it's been, pretty cool. But, my brother-in-law, who is another one of those guys, man, his father passed, and he's amazing, and he's a wonderful dad and husband, 2 kids. I remember him saying something to my nephew, Tyler. He had a home run, and he came and celebrates Bunky.
Oh, man. Shoot, that dude is solid rock, man.
Bunky is amazing, man. So Bunky, he said something to Tyler one time. Tyler was a great baseball player. And he comes around and he celebrated one time, big time. And he said something, act like you've been there before. Like hitting home runs is like the norm. Right. So since then, Tyler will come around and he just, real cool with it, right? I think that I'm kind of like that, right? I feel like I've had such success or encouragement. I've always been in nurturing environments. I'm not from an abusive environment. Man, I've been in all these wonderfully nurturing environments, man. So anything I'm doing, what they say, to whom much is given, much is anticipated or expected. Right. That's how I feel. So I'm not going to be on any list for this under that or the top this or that. I don't go after those things. Those are things for other people who've had a harder road. For me, I see myself as needing to have done even more. So I'm always pushing myself because I feel like the platform and foundation I was given was so strong that I'm supposed to be doing what I'm doing and even more.
Right. What was that moment you realized you was black?
It's funny you mentioned that. It took a moment. You know, when you're from these nurturing environments, it's something about Morehouse too. It's like, man, going down there, it was just an extension of all of the nurturing environments I've been in all of my life. Morehouse, extremely nurturing environment. I think the first thing that time hit for me is like when Dr. Herron ended up being elected. So I've never had these, moments. And if I have, I've dealt with them in a way that,
Right.
The first incident that I can recall is Applebee's on Union. Dr. Herron had just won, and me and my buddy, we go back to diapers, Ed Stanton.
Oh, wow.
Ed and I, we rolled up and had a couple of officers there who were like security for the night. And we were trying to get in. Long story short, we saw somebody we knew and they didn't like that we didn't wait in line. We saw somebody, a couple girls, we went and sat down at the table, skipped the whole line. So on our way out, I'm talking cash money, driving my little stick shift. I'm talking cash money. I said, man, y'all don't be mad at us because, I'm talking to the officers. I had to. You've seen my mouth. I'm verbal.
Right.
Because they were kind of talking a little bit. And I said, man, don't be mad at us. I know we got a black mayor now. Don't be mad at us. And one of the brothers was, don't be mad at us. So next thing I know, they hemmed us in and pulled us over and wouldn't let us leave the lot. And at the time, I'd been selling Cutco knives. Have you ever heard of Cutco knives? CUTCO knives. And I just made a statement. I was like, look, man. I said, listen, I'm looking for my license. I couldn't find my license.
Oh, wow.
I said, listen, don't be surprised now. I sell Cutco knives. Well, there's a little bag. Now, if I pulled out the little bag, what I didn't realize is that the dude had pulled a gun out and put it to Ed's head. When I made this little statement, joking or whatever. And long story short, just the reaction of those officers at the time was such an interesting thing to me, right? Long story short, Ed ended up having to switch over and drive stick, but he didn't know how to drive a stick. So we went through this whole little back and forth. It just was, but at that moment, a little funny, but it was like a moment where I reflected on it. Hey, man, what in the world? Interestingly enough, so funny that I would end up, being chief of staff for a mayor, and this guy, Ed, would end up being U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Tennessee, right? So that moment stands out. But again, man, nurturing environments have not dealt with the type of things that others have. So
Okay. Early memories, school. What was that like? You, your boys. Now I've seen pictures of you at Central.
Oh man,
with your boys.
First of all, shout out to Sean O'Bannon.
There you go.
I see. It's all me. We call each other's name out in the hall. Let me say this about school.
Okay.
I think Central High School was like, it's like one of the best things going. Bellevue Junior High as well. I went to Bellevue and went to Central. I was surrounded by, because this was the thing that I thought was special about Central. And I think that it would be a wonderful thing that friends and groups of people that you're with, so important. Everybody I hung around was smart. You know, at Central, it was also one of those things, you couldn't just be a pretty girl. The pretty girls are smart, right?
Right.
It was like, so Central, and then I also remember my sister was 3 years older than me, Tangela.
Okay.
So when she went from Bellevue to Central, and, I go up there, and there were cats like Martavius Jones.
Right.
And Malcolm Burke, Miriam King, just cats like that. And then other cats who were a little younger, Charles Elliott, Robert Crawford, who was my inspiration. Charles and Robert went to Morehouse.
Right.
And Robert was like my inspiration for going to Morehouse. And those guys, man, so smart. All of them, they were smart and cool, right?
Right.
So this whole thing about, man, first of all, you couldn't be no dummy. Second of all, you can still be cool and be smart, man. So it's like one of those things I not understood. That was a wonderful environment, and seeing those wonderful examples. All these people who are doing great. I mean, the Wendy Schennefelds, the Kevin Nickelberries, so many wonderful people that were friends and and colleagues and folks who've done really well, but also were, these are also the coolest dudes. I went from being the most likely to succeed in the 9th grade at Bellevue to the wittiest in the 12th grade at Central. That's pretty much my personality wrapped up in one. Yeah,
Your transition, man. You went to Morehouse. What was it like when you were leaving Morehouse? Because I'm sure you got plenty of stories of the house, but leaving Morehouse, becoming a professional man, what was that like, and what was that transition like?
I think Morehouse poured a lot into me. I speak of it lovingly because it was a wonderful experience. My first entree into politics came under Maynard Jackson.
Really?
Yeah, man. When Rodney King happened, I was out there protesting with students who marched downtown.
Right.
Ended up me and my buddy Tim Milner, thousands of students. We ended up on the front stair at City Hall. So somebody that worked for Maynard came out and let me say, Maynard Jackson was a Morehouse man. He was elected 2 terms in the 70s, first black mayor in Atlanta, came back and elected in 1989 with like 80% of the vote. Crazy. An amazing mandate from the people. So when Rodney King happened, I was on the front stair and said a few words and everybody was cheering. I wasn't the guy that led them down there, but those words had the folks thinking that I was.
Right.
I ended up getting pointed out by Maynard after he came out, Mayor Jackson after he came out, calmed the crowd down. He was revered.
Right.
Next thing I know, I'm in a car with him, me and my buddy Tim Milner, and I'm organizing SGA presidents from across the AUC for a meeting later on with the college presidents and with the SGA presidents, and then leading up to a meeting at chapel, at the MLK Chapel on Morehouse's campus.
Right.
Walking in to Spelman, Janetta Cole there, calming everybody down, walking in with the mayor. Lord, the juice was amazing. But I would say this, Morehouse was important. Leaving Morehouse, this whole idea of social responsibility that's a HBCU thing, it's a Morehouse thing. This idea, that's what led me to go back to, I was a teacher for like 3 years. High school.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
3 years in the neighborhood where I grew up, Tennessee Teacher Corps program, neighborhood where I grew up. And this is before I transitioned over, got into politics and working there, and had gotten offered a job at the White House because we had done advanced work for Al Gore and Bill Clinton, me and a couple of my guys, Ed, Ike, Steve, Reese. But the whole idea is that social responsibility part that's woven into me. I think that my time as a professional during those 3 years, I saw my job as just not teaching math and trigonometry, geometry, algebra 2. Right. I saw it as also how am I influencing these kids who are in my class, right? So I think the social responsibility part has kind of shaped me throughout. Didn't just get it at Morehouse, it just was reinforced at Morehouse. But that's how I saw myself professionally.
Wow. What's your why? Why you get up every morning and fight a good fight?
I get up every morning because I want there to be a world where a kid that looks like my 9-year-old son, Sam, feels that they are empowered to go out and be anything that they desire to be. Our story, 50 million views of a video of me beatboxing and him rapping about things he can be when he grow up. Something he helped me do when he was 5 years old. It's still amazing. A book that's all around the country, Dolly Parton Imagination Library.
Right.
That's my why. It's always been my why. That's always been my why of, what is it that we can do to inspire the next generation to go beyond us. What they say, every round goes higher, right?
Right.
I mean, listening to you and the story of your sons, man, it's an amazing thing. It's this idea that we want to set them up. We want to be the platform, the shoulders they can stand on.
Exactly.
To not just aspire and go higher, but what you find is that they take friends along, they inspire people in their age group.
Exactly.
So I think that's been my why. It's the idea that my why I now have a son, but it's always been that way as I've thought about other little black boys and who many times have not had, male role models in their lives.
What did Memphis give you?
Memphis gave me everything. It gives me this concept of serving.
Hold on. Let me ask that differently.
Yeah.
What did Memphis give you that you don't think you could have gotten anywhere else?
I think that the one thing that, in terms of couldn't have gotten anywhere else, I kind of have this mindset that if you put me in any city, that I potentially doing what I'm doing at some level, right?
Right.
I think what Memphis gave me is I think Memphis gave me this idea that what I love about my city is that we still are some things that we are figuring out, right? We're not that city, we're not that other city. I think Memphis is giving all of us at some level work to do, right? I think what it's given us is giving us certain resources and assets, but it's also giving us work to do. It's not like, there's a whole lot of people who love to go to a city after the city is already, is already meteoric in terms of what it's been able to do.
Right.
I feel myself, I'm kind of like, I love an underdog in any story. And I'm not saying that is who we are as a city. I think we've had great highs, but I think the challenges that we face now are such that it's given me a story to tell, a challenge, work to do, the type of thing that I've aspired to do, which is to help fix stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think that one of the things that Memphis has given us is giving me hope for the future, and the idea that this is something we can see in my lifetime and the type of work that I think that we can do to be influential.
Okay. Go back over your span of your life so far at this point. Is there anything you do over, any regrets? Anything that you would say, you know what, if I could take a mulligan on that?
I think that there's an interesting pathway, right? I think there's an imbalance that sometimes some things happens, our losses keep us humble. There's this song, Jonathan McReynolds, I can't think of all the words of it, but it's this idea that we experience enough trouble to keep us humble, enough tragedy to keep us prayerful, right. And enough wins to keep us empowered and moving forward. I think that the grand sum of where I am right now is where I should be and I'm supposed to be. There's some things that I think I would do differently, but I think it's part of the story of who I am at this point and how I kind of relate to everybody else. I wouldn't necessarily say there's anything I would, there may be a thing. I wouldn't necessarily say it on television. I'm not gonna put any names out there. I could save myself a little time and trouble.
Right.
But I will say that, I think that you get to these points and you kind of recognize, man, okay, this may not necessarily been the straight line, but this is where I am right now. And I think it's a combination of the pluses and the minuses. So I take all of it.
Okay.
I take all of it.
You're going back to South Memphis. You see the house that you were raised in. You walk up to the door. You open the door. You see this little kid, kind of look like Sam, but it's actually young Bobby White. What would you say to that kid?
I feel like I've gotten at this age where I think I would have accelerated some things, right? I think I would have, it's one of those things where I've always been comfortable in terms of like, shucks, I was telling somebody I'm not gonna tell them I identify by a certain pronoun, but I identify by an adjective. I identify by the adjective younger. Okay. I got a 9-year-old. I got to identify as younger.
Right.
So I do have this mindset where I'm recognizing that I think younger, my innovation and all these things that go through my brain, I think it's like, and I don't want to define young as as some older folks, you're being one of them, and not that we are old or anything of the sort. I just say that if there's anything to be said about that, I would say don't wait. To a younger version of myself is to go after it now, right? I do think there's a thing of divine timing, but at the same time, I think that there's so many things that looking back, I would have maybe taken advantage of, because sometimes you don't know how good you have it, right?
Right.
Until some of those things are gone. So I think I would have been more like enjoying the moments and soaking it in and appreciating the people around, right?
Okay.
I think that's something that I would have possibly said.
Well, this is the last question. And, one of the things I want people to get from here is these young people are watching this, they're listening to it. I would like you to speak directly into that camera and leave the people that are watching this moment to something that they can take with them that they will know. that I got this from the conversation with Bobby White?
Well, I think for me is that reminding us all that, I have this saying that God sprinkles genius on every side of town. Everybody's not the same. Recognizing that, your destiny being in your hand, taking advantage of it and not allowing anyone to take you off track from who you can be. I think they say everything that the great heights of life, when you talk about love, love has height, breadth, and length. And one of those elements to love is love for self. And the best expression of self-love is believing in yourself and going after what is important to you. So don't let anybody get you off track. Work hard at it, and you'll end up where you should be.
I can't say it better myself, and there's no more I can add to it. Listen, I'm Larry Robinson. For our wonderful guest, Brother Bobby White.
Appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And love the frames, by the way, brother. They're popping.
Well, listen, we're going to keep bringing them. I just need you to keep coming back. This is The Journey on the Kazuki Network. Till next time. Thank you to our partner, the Grand Boulé of Sigma Pi Phi Fraternity, Delta Chapter. To hear more incredible stories like this, be sure to download the Kazukian app from the App Store or Google Play, or check out the Journey Memphis podcast on all your major podcast providers. Also, check us out on the Kazukian Network.